Tonight we'll be having the second lesson in our series that I've titled Poured Out, and it's a Bible study series on Mary of Bethany. And if you weren't with us last week, I hope you watched lesson one, which was all about spikenard oil. And if you did not receive a bookmark from me with the scent on it, please reach out and let me know so that I can send you one. I think it just really adds to my journaling experience when I get a whiff of that scent, and it just involves more of my senses. And when I'm learning something, I always learned when I was a kindergarten teacher that the more of the senses I brought in for my students, the better they were going to learn. And so I think that's an example of you get that smell and it just brings back what you've learned about the importance of this oil. And tonight we're going to be looking at Mary and what was the posture of her heart. She had a heart that chose Jesus, and we see that multiple times throughout Scripture that she chose him over everything else. And so I'm going to read these scriptures that we read last week. I'll read them a little bit faster since we've read them once before, but I want us to just really be thinking about Mary this time. What did she do? What are some characteristics that we can learn about her from these passages? So Mark 14, 3 through 6, while he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman, she's unnamed here, came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another. I looked up that word. What does that mean? Indignantly. And it says it's an adjective that describes a feeling or showing anger, but not just showing anger. It's because something unfair has happened. The person feels like something wrong or unjust has happened, and they're angry about it. And so they were upset about this waste of the perfume. Wow, this waste of perfume. It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. Leave her alone, said Jesus. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. And then in Matthew 26, 6 through 13, we hear the same passage from another writer, or the same story from another writer. While Jesus was in Bethany in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. And then we find out here who she is. She's Mary. She's, differentiated from Mary Magdalene and other Marys. The mother of Jesus, as Mary of Bethany, which is where she lived, and she was Martha and Lazarus' sister. And so John 12, 1 through 8 tells us more. But I'm going to read 1 through 3 here. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. And so, in my studies this week, I have read and learned that, this was a celebration of what Jesus had done for Lazarus when he raised him from the dead. And so they were celebrating and spending time with Jesus, and their hearts were just so full of gratitude. And I'm sure Martha was busying herself with the dinner and the meal, which was what it says here. She was serving. Um, but here again, Mary just wants to spend time with him and do something very, very special for him. And so, what do we know about her? We know that she was the sister of Lazarus and Martha. We know she was a devoted follower of Jesus. Jesus spent time in their home on different occasions. So, they were friends. And we know that she loved Jesus. She had a deep affection for him. And so, we see those the story of these ladies, and this story is told very often, and I think Martha often gets a bad rap for being busy with all of her chores. But in Luke 10:38 through 42, it says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. So here we see her just sitting and listening. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. So here we're seeing, Martha was worried about what Mary was doing. She was making these comparisons. Remember, comparison steals your joy. That's something we learned a few years back. When we are worried about everyone else, we lose the joy of what we are doing. Martha is serving. That's her spiritual gift, I feel like. And she wasn't offering it to him in that way. She was more concerned about just getting the job done and having someone help her. And the Lord, Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. And so we see again that was the posture of Mary. She just wanted to be in his presence. She just wanted to hear what he had to say and spend time with him. So when we look at Mary, there are some things that, through going back and looking at Jewish tradition and Jewish law, some things Mary did were not breaking Jewish law, but they were very much not keeping with Jewish tradition. And one of those was the fact that she let her hair down. This symbolized extreme humility, and it was a very personal act. So what I have here in parentheses, we shouldn't say that every Jewish woman was legally required to cover her hair at all times. The practice varied by time, place, marital status, and social setting, but the cultural association between a woman's hair and modesty was certainly significant. So the fact that she uncovered her hair and used her hair in such a personal way could have very much been frowned upon. She touched a man who was not her husband. Her actions symbolize her intimacy and her humility. And she was touching his head, she was touching his feet, she was letting her hair down, she was rubbing his feet with her hair. She was just totally engrossed in her service, her worship, and she was not thinking about, what was socially acceptable. She was just truly in the moment, I feel like. And she sat at the feet of Jesus, which would have been the position of a man learning from a rabbi. So you see in scripture, it says that Lazarus was reclining there with him at the table, but that's not what a woman would have been doing. They would have been serving. They would have been doing what Martha was doing. And so she neglected her responsibilities of hospitality. That was her role. And here again, that wasn't against the law, but it was very unusual for a woman to be the one at the table, reclining and talking and learning. Those would have been things that the men did. And she anointed a living man with burial perfume. You know, we learned last week the importance of this oil. It was not used just on an everyday occasion for something very trivial. And this was seen as being a trivial waste of this oil. But for Mary, it was pouring out the best of what she had on the one that she loved the most. And so you can see here that Mary did a lot of things that may have been frowned upon. But what did that represent for her? What was she doing? You know, she had to break open that alabaster flask. And once she did that, she was unable to hold any of that oil back. She couldn't reserve some of it for later. She wasn't worried about it being her dowry. She wasn't worried about it being for her retirement or, to keep her safe for her future financially. It could have been used for her own burial or someone in her family, her inheritance. She wasn't worried about her reputation when she let her hair down and rubbed his feet with her hair. She wasn't worried about her friends and family's opinions of her. You know, I listened to John Piper and he was saying, we don't know how they obtained this oil. It could have been that Mary, Martha, Lazarus, everyone pulled their money from within their family. They may have gone out and solicited funds from friends and neighbors to have the money to buy it. Um, it could have been that they were a wealthier family and had the resources. We don't know that. We just know that her heart was in a place to pour it out. And she wasn't worried about her security. She certainly risked looking foolish being a Jewish woman in that day, doing the things that she did. And so when we look at Mary's act of worship, she poured out something precious and she held nothing back. She didn't save it for later. And it just shows the intimacy of their relationship. And so when you use the word intimate, a lot of times that can sound like a sexual word, but it's non-physical and emotional intimacy, sharing deep, uninterrupted thoughts and fears, giving full, undivided attention during a conversation. We know she did that. Doing small favors or acts of service without asking for credit. So Mary didn't do this for the attention she was getting. The attention she was getting was negative. She was being rebuked by Jesus's own followers, his disciples. And so she wasn't looking for credit, but it was very intimate because of her love and her devotion for him. And, you know, he definitely had her
Only had her.
undivided attention. And so when we think, what are we willing to pour out? Are we willing to pour out our failures, our plans, our resources, our reputation? Excuse me, our vulnerability, our control, our worship, our relationships, our time. What part of yourself have you been afraid to bring to Jesus or fully give him? Um, as I've reflected on this summer, you know, there's a lot of things that I worry about fully surrendering. Um, you think if I fully surrender this, God's plan might be, and you think of something negative, might be something negative. You know, if I fully surrender all my worries of my for my children, what if I just fully surrender my children to Him? What if something bad happens to them? Am I willing to, allow something bad to happen to them as though I have any control of that? It's so selfish and prideful to even think that way. Wouldn't we want to just give our everything to Him, knowing He works all things together for good, and it's going to be for the good of the person we just turn over. Um, so these are the things I want you to think about as you do your journal this week. What will I place in his hands? Mary poured out what was precious to her. She held nothing back. She gave him her time. She gave him her attention. She gave him her affection, her resource of this oil that was so valuable. And so what could I be holding back? What am I afraid to surrender to him? What am I afraid that people might think if I do? Well, what will people think if I raise my hands during worship? What will people think if I went to the altar to pray? What would people think? They're going to think something bad's going on in my life. Um, all of those little things can come into your mind. What am I trying to control? What do I need to release? What is precious to me that Jesus may be asking me to place at his feet? And so, my idea for a journal page this week, this might be one of my favorite journal pages I've ever done. Um, the the lady that I told you had the series of lessons on this Bible story that gave me the inspiration for these lessons. One of the ladies did this journal page of the hands, and I love that. She was Dutch, I think, and so some of it is in her language, her home language. But I thought I love the idea of putting I Surrender All, the hymn, on my page. I found this picture online, Mary of Bethany at his feet, worship over worry. And the things that are here around her, I thought were interesting to think about in doing this journal page. Worship starts with listening. Do we spend time with him just listening? Choose presence over performance. Your offering matters to Jesus. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to get a drink. My throat's very dry. Sorry about that. The posture of your heart counts. Love is shown in action, and what you pour out, he remembers. And we saw that in scripture. He says Mary's going to be remembered for this act. She did what she could. And then this little heart book that's in the hands of this inspiration picture. Here is a little example of one of those books, but I'm going to show you how I made mine. And then here's a printable that will give you the hands that I used in my journal and a couple other things that I'm going to show you. So let me share my journal. So I have an old hymn book that I got at the Goodwill store. In fact, I've got a couple of them that were falling apart, and I take out hymn pages from those to use in my journal. But on the printable page, I have a sheet of I Surrender All. And it was on two different pages in the hymn book. So it worked out perfectly for me to use one part of it here at the top, and I just tore it around the edges and did it again at the bottom. I have two different size hands on the printable. One is this size, and then the larger one. So you can do it however you want. I think the larger one works better because when I used this, it was going to land right in the middle of my journal, which would not have been a good pocket for the little book. So either way, you could make that so that it's just on one page and it would still hold your hands. And I also have them going from the left and from the right so that you could use whichever layout you want. It took me hours to get these hands right here through AI. I could not find any hands online that I liked for this. And so finally, after multiple attempts, it was able to create these hands. It still made this part look like, one arm. Hands are very hard for AI. I've heard and read and learned. So these turned out pretty good, all things considered. But I just took a little marker or a little colored pencil and made that look like a definition for the two arms. And then I used a X-Acto blade and a little mat, but I mean, you could use whatever you have. And I just followed along the thumb and the pointer, which is another reason the larger hands are better. You're going to have a bigger pocket
Bigger pocket.
for your little heart book. So I cut that out, and my X-Acto blade's a little bit dull. So, but cutting that out so that you have a hole that runs along the thumb and down this pointer finger. That's going to be that part of the hand. And so you can see on mine, it runs from right here at the back of the thumb down to the front of the pointer finger right there. Creates my pocket. And when I glued it down, I let the edges of the hem sheet come over the arm on each side. And then I just used Distress ink. If any of you are new and haven't seen a lot of my crafting supplies, this is one of my favorite things. This one's called Gathered Twigs, but I guess my favorite one is Vintage Photo. You can order these online. Sometimes Hobby Lobby has it. And I just use a makeup sponge. They sell little dabbers, but I've always just used a makeup sponge. You dab the edge, and then you can go around the edges of things to give it this aged look. So that's how I do that. I don't know if shoe polish would work, but it probably would if you wanted to use that. So um, I use little stamps for my lettering. You can use sticker letters, whatever you want to use. I like these. You can get this size at the Dollar General store, and I think a pack used to be $5, but I'm not sure if that's what they still cost. And I wrote out, Mary had a heart that chose Jesus, dot, dot, dot. You know, like there's more to come. Do I? Do I have a heart that chooses Jesus? Then in my little book, I took a piece of tag board, and I also printed out the hands on tag board. That way they are sturdy enough, to make that hole. Regular paper would probably tear. That's why I use something a little bit sturdier. I just folded a piece of scrap paper and cut out a heart. So that's how I made this heart. It just happened to be a good size to fit in there. But you could play around with that, make a little heart, and then after you've done that, you can use it as a pattern to make your other hearts. And I made 3. This is also a little picture for that's on your printable sheet if you want to use it. And it's just Mary using her hair to wipe Jesus's feet. And I folded those, fold each one of them separately. You can glue that onto the front of one of these, and then fold each one separately. If you try to fold them all together, they won't fold straight. And I know that because, that's what I did. And then you're going to put these together with just a string. So I poked 2 holes, 2 tiny holes, and I'm going to go in from the back side because I don't want the tie to be in the front. It might be better if it is because then it might fit in the heart. I mean, the heart might fit in the hands better, but I don't want it to block my picture. So I'm going to tie it on the back. Just put it through those holes and then tie it. Tie it tight so that it holds your book together. Okay. Then you can tie it until it's done. Trim that off. Doesn't matter. And then I have a book. So what will I place in his hands? And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 places that you can write a prayer. You could write, what you feel like at this time in your life, you need to just lay at his feet. Maybe it's, some of the things that were on that um, pride in how you worship. Maybe it's, ultimately giving your family to Him. Um, Problems within your family. It can be any number of things that you just need to give to Him. Trust Him with it. Mary was trusting Him with her future when she poured that oil out. Um, and I read this today and I wanted to read it to you. It says, Mary came to Jesus with something precious in her hands, but ultimately, what Mary was giving Jesus wasn't just perfume, she was giving Him her heart. Tonight, I want you to think about your own hands. If you could place one thing in these hands and give it completely to Jesus, what would it be? I think that's a good question for all of us to meditate on this week. And when you do your journal, that's what this is about. Um, this should be, if you do a journal, it should be a form of worship. It should not feel like something you have to do and check off your list and get it done before Monday of the next week. If it feels like that, then it's not a worshipful thing for you. So, you know, second guess whether or not you should do a journal. But if you do a journal, it should be a time that you just come before Him and you just pour your heart out to Him in through your creation, whatever it might be. And it doesn't have to be like mine or anyone else's. You can see from the journals that have been posted on Facebook that you each have such great ideas, and we just learn from each other. The other thing that I did, and it was to add a little bit of color to the edge of my page, and I was just going to put it somewhere, but I made it, and don't you know, it was the exact size to make like a little cuff for that arm. And so I just put it there, and it looks kind of like a little um, clothing cuff. But I made that out of fabric, just zigzagging some fabric and running it through the sewing machine. But you can do the same thing with paper. All you have to do is put some glue, put some glue on your paper and then zigzag fold it just like that. And it will hold with the glue that I've told you about. It would probably hold good with Elmer's too. And you can put two pieces. I use two pieces of fabric. You can do the same thing with two pieces of paper and just zigzag them together and then hold them until they dry. And then you can use it as like a little tab on the edge of your page. Or you can use them, as decorations on a page. They add a lot of texture, I think, and color. And you can also add washi tape. But to me, this is just a page that I love the interacting pocket. I love the little book, a place to kind of hide and jot down your thoughts. And this hymn, just thinking about what do I need to surrender? What do I need to give to Him? And then having a heart that wants, do I want to spend time with Him every day like Mary? Or am I too worried about getting my floor clean like Martha? And I think there's value in both, but what is most important? He says Mary chose the better thing.